Hello, I'm Anthony Rader, and welcome to Politically Unhinged. Now, Politically Unhinged is a podcast focusing on the social aspects of conservatism. Today's topic is whether or not it is okay to agree 100% with a politician. Personally, I'm going to tell you this. It is wrong if you agree 100% with any politician ever. You should not be agreeing on everything with them. This is even coming from someone with political aspirations and has worked on political campaigns. Agreeing with a politician 100% can lead to many different problems. We need to understand that we are all different human beings. We have different experiences. We can disagree with our elected officials on numerous things. This is what makes the country so great. Now, we grow up typically in families. We grow up in basically the nuclear household in America and in other countries as well. The problem with going after the nuclear family is that you're not going to have any stable belief systems, and that is actually what big governments want. So, our belief systems come from our families. They come from our mother, fathers. They come from our parents. They come from our communities all around us. This is also how you can get some liberals that have conservative kids and conservative that have liberal kids. The problem is that when you have this shows that your construct isn't as tight-knit as you would like. But at the same time, as long as these kids hold the same values as you do, socially, or not even politically, they are your children. No matter what. The way that you raise them is how their life is impacted. Now, I might not have any kids of my own, but being in a community has always have an impact on children's lives. We need to understand that all of these different aspects in conservatism and in liberalism are different constructs. These constructs include just different social and economic values of both parties. But all of these different constructs come from within our nuclear family. And the way that people are raised and brought up into this world. Because let's be honest, we are not going to have the same experiences. We might have similar experiences with different outcomes. We need to understand that none of us can be like one another. We can have similarities. This is where people look for in spouses and in friends. Notice how a lot of people are now looking for people that have the same political output that they have. In the past, it wasn't like that. In the past, the people had the same, basically had the same values. Let's be honest. But something has changed in the past 20, 30 years. Our minds have been ingrained into these social constructs and all of these different values that should not be a thing. We need to understand that as the American people, and just as people in general, we have to understand that we are who we are for the situations that we have been through. We need to understand that we need to help each other, but along the way, we lost it. We lost our rights as humans. We lost what made us human. Let's be honest. What made us human is that we had empathy. We were able to see others as we were ourselves. We were able to put ourselves in different shoes. Now, if you think differently, you're either a racist or a bigot. You're called this way by politicians and your fellow citizens alike. This all comes back to our topic. If you agree 100% with a politician, there is something wrong. Now, it's no secret about my political beliefs. I am a conservative, but I am very, very pro-Constitution. I am probably one of the most conservative people that you will ever meet. But we need to understand that we got to find what we like to call the middle ground. But it's hard to find this now because both sides have become so polarized with their beliefs. One side being that all white people are racist. The other side being, well, just shut up, basically. Let's be honest. This is what everything's going to happen to me. Yeah. You have one side thinking logically and you have another side thinking emotionally. And in all honesty, I'm going to tell you something. It's better to think logically than emotionally. If you think emotionally, you're going to end up being irrational. Thinking emotionally gets us into situations that we don't want to be in. This is why you have men particularly yet talking to women, because like women tend to act on emotion. Men tend to act on the logical. It has been that way for centuries. This is why you see an outpour of Democrat support on the female side. And more for the conservative side, you have more males. But there's always an exception to this rule. There are many exceptions to this rule. In fact, there are men that are Democrats and women that are Republicans. There are women that think logically, and there are men that think emotionally. Sometimes you get people that are in the middle and think both. The thing is that a man will think logically and find out what the problem is. And then with women, this is where it comes with the social aspect. Your social aspect of thinking is your emotion. We tend not to think emotionally with everything, but we forget that part of politics is emotional. Our social constructs should be labeled as emotional, and our economics should be labeled as logical. This is where these two tend to divide. Women typically vote on more of the social constructs. Men typically vote on the logical constructs of things. Things such as the economy. But like I said, there's always exceptions to this rule. And like I said, this all goes back to our topic of the show. You should never agree with a politician 100%. Now, as someone that has worked on the campaign and has volunteered multiple times and is in the political sphere, there's no politician that I agree 100% with. Even politicians that I like, I do not agree 100% with. There are politicians that I want to meet and work with, but we are not going to always agree. There's always a divide in people. Like, for instance, you're also not going to always agree with your parents, but we all knew that growing up as a teenager. With your siblings, you're not always going to agree politically as well. You guys had similar upbringings, but you're still different human beings. People do not understand that the mind is crucial. This is why you have Republicans coming out against grooming, and rightfully so. And in all honesty, I do not see a problem with that, coming out against it. But there are people that are pushing against that as well, thinking on the emotional side. But the problem is that a country or a civilization cannot survive without having the logical aspects that have been working for centuries. Now people have been saying, well, if it's been working for centuries, maybe it is time to change it up. But sometimes we have to look at the aspects of things, going like, well, maybe it has been this way because it works. For the last few years, we have been trying to revamp everything in this country. This country is founded on change. That is a fact. This country is founded on the principles of freedom. For the last few years, we have seen this during the pandemic, that people do not appreciate the freedom anymore. People take the Constitution, they say that it's just a dead historical artifact. But the thing is that they keep on forgetting that the Constitution is living. We need to understand where people come from because, remember, you are not supposed to agree on everything. Just because I am best friends with someone does not mean we are going to agree on, let's say, voting or gun rights. We have to understand that people have their different opinions. We have to respect those opinions. The problem with the left and the right is that they have both become so polarized against each other that they no longer look out for the American people and for the children. I personally believe that people that take their kids to drag shows should no longer have rights to that children. But I understand that they are their children. Those are their children. And maybe we just have to put actual restrictions on stuff like this. This is why people say, well, we need tougher gun legislation. We need tougher this. We need tougher that. But there's always one point that brings people up, that tells people, no, we do not want this. This is particularly the politicians. The majority of the American people want ID to vote. However, your politicians do not. This is one of the many aspects that the people do not 100% agree with their elected officials. Some people agree that there needs to be a higher minimum wage. Other people do not. The younger generation thinks emotionally, and this is just a fact. The younger people tend to be more intact with their emotions. They think on the emotional side because they want to be empathetic towards everything. This is very popular with people that are in their teens to early 30s. Now, as someone that is in their mid-20s, people that understand that I basically skipped that, or I went into that phase really early in life. But we have to understand that there are times to think emotionally and times to think logically. We do not want to get ourselves into different situations that we will soon regret. Thinking one way too often will get you into different situations that are not going to be good. People have to find the balance of these situations in order to find out what is good for the American people. Many politicians have said that they were voted in by the people of their state, so they're going to vote the way that the people of their state want them to vote. John McCain famously said that the people of Arizona elected him for his opinions. Sadly, this is how a lot of the politicians feel now. They do not feel that they are elected to support you, to support your voice. This is one of the many instances why we all disagree with politicians on some type of form. There are people that vote Democrat but do not want to push all of this economic relations. There are people that vote Republican that want to push more economic relations. But with everything that's going on in the world, we have to understand that young people care more about, well, what's good for Mother Earth. People that tend to be younger tend to be more intact, worrying about the earth, worrying about the animals, just the ecosystem in general. But younger people have not had enough life experience to understand that there is a continuation, and all the polluting that happens is typically done by third world countries, such as China. People say that China is not a third world country, but it sure in fact is. India, people also like to say India is a rising power. But in all honesty, it's a third world country, but it is a country to watch in the future. The way that India's climate is moving, it will be a superpower in the next few decades. People got to understand that in order to think emotionally, you also have to weigh your logical opinions. But people have failed to understand that emotional does not trump logical, and vice versa. People do not understand that there are times to think different ways. There are times you are supposed to think emotionally. There are times you're supposed to think logically. It's just that simple. When you're on the job, you're supposed to think logically. That is just 100%. You are not supposed to get mad at a child if you are a teacher. You have to think logically. Well, they're a child. They do not know better. If you're at home, you can think emotionally. But we have to understand that both ways are irrational. Thinking one way too much is way too irrational, and the American people seem to not get that through their heads. This is true for both sides. Both sides think logically in different ways. Both sides also think emotionally in different ways. We also got to understand that each side has their reasons for thinking this way. When there is a mass shooting, you see the left side going all like, we need to ban guns, we need to do this. They are thinking emotionally at that standpoint. And then you have the right side saying that no, people have the right to protect themselves. They have the right to own guns. They are thinking more in the logical aspect of things. We have to understand that all these different things line up with how people are raised. The saying is that if you are not a liberal, by the time you are 20, you do not have a heart. And if you're not a conservative by you are 35, you don't have a brain. Many people do not have a heart or a brain because of their different aspects. Like I said, liberals tend to vote more on feeling. Conservatives think logically. We need to understand that people come from different paths. We have lost that. People used to be more unified back then, and now people just get a screen and they think they are indestructible and they do not no longer have any empathy. People back then had more empathy than people do now. They like to say that the younger generation is more emotional. That may be true, but we need to understand that these different people did not grow up in the times that the younger generations are. The social media generation has risen, and they have a more significant depression rate. This is because of these different interactions on social media. And you are seeing that kids and young adults that don't typically go out as often, they have lost their sense of community. Community is what it all boils down to. People around their own age tend to like people their own age, let's be honest. There are exceptions though. Like I said, there's an exception to every single rule. And we have forgot that. Every single person in the West has forgotten that there are exceptions. But we need to understand at the same time, times are different. But we also need to understand that times are also not so different. We have just allowed one side to push hard and push everyone to a different direction. Ben Shapiro has said that the wind is most likely going to turn in 2023. I hope he's right. In all honesty, I think there needs to be a sense of normalcy back in the Western world. But we also have to understand that the world that our parents grew up in is no longer here. The problem is that people are on the internet and not connecting with each other. So you see people are acting more irrational even in person. This is why I try to always be nice to people and make their day, because that one smile that you do to someone could change their life. You just got to be nice to your own people. It doesn't matter if you know what they do politically, what they do on the side. You just being empathetic towards people will change someone's life. Again, this goes back to our topic of the day. It is wrong to agree 100% with politicians. And if a politician disagrees with that remark, that is not the politician that you want representing you. Because they are going to be authoritarian and they will censor anyone. I am a big believer in freedom of speech, but there are companies and politicians alike that want to censor people. We just have to look at each other. We have to look in the mirror. We have to say what is important. Is it important to make our lives better now, or is it important to leave this place better for the next 3 generations? People always say focus on the next generation. No, we're thinking too small. We have to focus on the next 3. Focusing on the next 3 generations will actually help fix the present. We have to understand that we do not want to leave this world with very little impact, or the impact that we make is very negative. Sadly, what's happening right now is a negative impact on the world. I don't think any of us want that. I think we all need to take a long look in the mirror and try to figure out, what do we want to do? Who do we want to be? What can we do to make our grandchildren's lives better in the modern day? This is the problem with every single generation on the earth, is that they always just think the next. What's going to happen next? Let's think about the next generation, the next people. After this step, what are we going to do next? There's a reason why in sports that say that you always want to be 3 steps ahead of your opponent, because it works. We need to apply that philosophy to life, because the difference that you make in someone's life now will affect generations to come. And politicians that say we need to focus on the present, we may be suffering in the present, but we can change the future. That's what we're here to do. That's what your elected officials are supposed to do. You're supposed to elect people that will change the future for years to come. Do we want our grandchildren to inherit a country, inherit a world full of hate? No, we do not. I know I sure do not. If we always focus on 3 generations, the next 3, we will have a better faith, better construct of what it means to be human. With that said, we need to understand that we are only human. Humans do make mistakes in good faith. Humans tend to make mistakes that happen to be bad at the time, and ended off paying it positively in the future. We say that there are just mistakes we have to make to figure out who we are. But when we are in the process of trying to change the world, we need to think 3 generations ahead. We have to think, who do we want to be? What world do you want your grandchildren to learn about? I know I am not happy that our grandchildren are going to be learning about all of these different riots that have happened in the last decade. You shouldn't either. This installment of hate by our politicians separating the people is the problem. And that is why you should never 100% fully agree with a politician. Thank you. All right. So, thank you for listening to the first episode of this podcast. If you like more, make sure you follow. And we will have several guests coming up. We will hopefully have congressmen coming up, but we need to understand that the way that we will be talking to the politicians on this podcast is that we are trying to get the other side of them. We are not going to have the side of them that's just what we see all the time. That is also the problem that we have as American people, is that we do not see the other side of our politicians. We do not see the humanity in them. All right. Now, I am going to leave you off with one of my favorite quotes from history. And who knows, maybe I will be quoted for saying something in this podcast later. But I will leave you with this right now. Our quote to end off the first podcast comes from Elvis Presley. It's not how much you love that makes people look up to you. It's who you are. Thank you, and God bless.